now they call it the canine cough because, they have to change it because, they pretty much won't get people to use it if they don't change the name because of how many dogs actually died a couple years ago. So I told her, you get that stuff. She didn't listen to me. I said he needs to be in a kennel outside for 7 to 10 days. You need to stay away from him until all that stuff loses the viral shed. And she didn't do it. So now she's screwed because she ended up 2 weeks after she got him the kennel cough. The doggy daycare centers, all started closing because, there were like dogs dropping dead of this kennel cough, kennel flu, because they all got the nasal vaccine and they were all re-giving it to each other, and the urine and the fecal matter and the saliva and everything else. So it was like a giant doggy pandemic. And she got it from her dog. And she got super sick for like 2 months, and the doctors could not figure out really what it was. Anyway, it's targeted her lungs. And now she has serious respiratory problems. She can't take in deep breaths. And her lungs have sustained some major, major damage. And she realizes now that what she had contracted from her dog during the shedding process of this virus was the kennel cough. And so she got a virus that her body should have never gotten because it's animal related. And it's damaged. It's damaged her lungs permanently. And the medical people and even the homeopathics and stuff, they can't figure anything out. They can't give her any kind of ideas. So I've been making some herbal medicines from plants, mainly, mullein root, that I've been reading can help with curing, Lyme disease. So I've been in the process right now of making some tinctures. They're all curing, to see if we can put together some kind of tincture that maybe can combat that virus. The thing is, I'm not really sure we can regenerate her lungs, though. I don't know what kind of scar tissue.
Something to think about is that when the immune system totally breaks down and it's gotten to the point where the cells are attacking each other, there is an effective treatment based on transfer of fecal matter from one person to another. And that by getting a whole different set of viruses from somebody else's fecal matter, people are healed of some of these things that have destroyed their immune system otherwise. So from what you've just explained...
I would never have that treatment.
From what you just explained to me, it's total idiocy. And the doctors are specifically ignorant of how virology works. You've explained virology much better than what they get. They don't get it.
Well, the thing is, I've been at this a really long time, and I've studied with some premier immunologists from around the world. I've studied with some amazing, brilliant people. I've been in private clinics.
A teaspoon of biodynamic compost would be the solution.
Hell yeah, that's exactly it. You should eat the soil. I mean, and this is the other thing too, is that this is another reason why these healing machines or shoving, somebody else's shit up your ass is not going to work. I've dealt with a lot of people who've had transplants or major blood infusions. And so I'm kind of anti about anything that belonged to somebody else going into your body because it has memory. And for example, I was around a guy for
not to mention allergens too. Might have a massive
the thing is you could get things worse than you already have. So anyway, so I was around this guy who had 2 heart transplants, and they don't tell people where they got the heart, but he said the first heart transplant was from a black woman that ate a lot of, just craved greasy food, fried chicken and all this other stuff. And he said he couldn't like help himself. And he could see her, you know, periodically. Like she was still, parts of her, you know, were still kind of interdimensional, right? That are operating in his system, you know, kind of almost like a level of possession, really. But he ended up getting more of the negative than the positive. And he said that heart didn't last very long. It almost killed him. She almost killed him. And so then he got a young kid's heart, like a 17-year-old that died in an accident, who was raised on a farm, who was in really great shape. And he was really successful with that guy. But, you know, he would have dreams and other things. And this person, you know, was still trying to live through him or communicate through him. So I think you have to be really careful. And then, you know, like on all the other levels, like you have infections or infectious type material that, you know, may also be introduced into the biological material. And so I think you have to stay away from a lot of these, you know, things. Obviously, if you're bleeding out and you're in some kind of an emergency situation, like I really don't know how, you know, how I would play that out. I definitely probably would die first before I would take blood. Pretty, you know, but I've, you know, almost died before I had.
I'm not sure you get to die in the traditional sense anymore. I think the way we have consciousness, that dying and the death culture is a myth that they've placed upon us to make us live in fear, and that...
Well, this is the thing is, you can't outrun the heaven experience, which is a prison for your soul. You're not going to be able to. I mean, this is what ancient shamans practiced. This was their main bulk of their practice. This is what the Tibetan Buddhists spend a whole lifetime doing, is practices so that when they die, that they can move through that obstacle course without being recaptured into the electronic prison system, and then have everything fried out of them, and then, you know, they're sent back in here. So we still have that operating system. That operating system isn't over. And so...
Am I still buzzing?
It's going to be a...
No, you're okay now, Ben.
Okay. Samsara. It's the idea of escaping the, you know, the wandering or the being lost in the material plane. So.
Yeah, well, they have a when they do the rainbow, I forget what they call it in the Tibetan Buddhism, when they do the rainbow thing, where they help the monk, you know, turn into rainbow light, and then, you know, because that's when the body's finally dead. It like literally shrivels up, and in some cases the body just completely disappears, so that it can't be reused. So a lot of these ancient shamans know what these people have been up to for a long time, and they know a lot of the teachings are no longer around, but they know how to bypass it. I was reading an article about Madonna. The only reason that Madonna has not been cloned is because, you know, even though she's part of that whole cabal network and is used, is because she early on found out how to clean up. She literally pays, you know, tons of money for people to come in and sanitize, you know, everything from her shows and where she channels. She literally has a sanitation person with her 100% all the time, so that she's not leaving any biological material anywhere, that they could actually, you know, create a clone of her. So
she's fully awake too. It's odd to see that in the music industry.
Yeah,
That's
so
just
I mean,
my
the thing
opinion.
is, like, you just have a lot of, you know, ancient shamanism practices and work that teach you how to bypass this whole world and, you know, bypass the heaven experience. And this is the other thing too that kind of, you know, I was kind of an anti-flat earther for a while, and I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle, because I'm realizing like what they show us is not real. You know, like people will say, well, I saw the moon landing
All
on
the not,
TV.
yeah. It's weird. It's really weird.
Happened.
They give us so many things that you can sink your teeth into. I mean, all the photos, there's no, that, I've looked at that. I'm totally agnostic, but that's a real point. A very good point that they make.
Yeah, they show you things like, I remember watching Ruther. Yeah, and he was showing somehow he got this video footage from the Mars rover, and it was in the desert in Las Vegas.
Yeah, there's also a site in Greenland. There's clearly because they found they had whale bones. They had a whale skull
or bone in
the background, and it was just. I almost feel like NASA's trying to make this divide even more pronounced than it is. Like they're trying to cause polarization because some of the tenets are really ancient. True.
They are. And in fact, you can see it in the 3 timeline theory that I've developed, because one of those timelines is the space timeline. And what we're getting is a massively rapid shift from what's falling apart to we're going into space, the final frontier. And they're trying to rush us into Star Trek and Star Wars based on the movies they sold us as fiction now becoming reality, and most people aren't buying it.
Well, but the thing is what are the main themes of these, futuristic movies? Is massive amounts of the population have to die.
That's the apocalypse timeline. That's another one, different from the space timeline. The aliens from space are going to rescue us from the apocalypse. That's how we get there from here, right?
Lenny, I think you're right, because if you look at the way they do these, these predictive programming movies, it's like there's 3 genres, really. It's the one sci-fi is like there's a massive war. It's like George Lucas's work and stuff. Then the other one is like the enclosed world thing. Like there's so many of those. I mean, Hunger Games is one. And then the third one is like, you said this dystopian thing, like Elysium and all these other ones. It's almost like the 3 different timelines.
Yep, and then there's a 4th timeline. There's a 4th timeline for all the extra characters also. So that the extras in all the scenarios, the people who wake up in the morning, go to work, stop at McDonald's on the way home and watch the television and believe anything, they're all there to just establish the scenario, and they're in their own timeline, and you can't never convince them of anything because it's not within their role that they play to go there with you. And so they're going to enforce the law. Go ahead.
In 2008, so all of those things that have in common is that there are people, in the future scenarios that are more important than other people, right? And that there's going to be more communities that have to be created where you can't trust anybody else because there's going to be pandemics and, all this other stuff. Remind me to talk about the programming, the red plague programming that I got when I was in 5th grade. The key here is that they're making people comfortable with what is coming, that it's going to be okay if millions and billions of people die.
Or go off into space, which is not dying, so that's okay.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. So you've got rapture, you've got ascension, you have harvesting. These are the same things, right? What in the Bible, when you rapture, you're taking your body, and going up to the sky. Well, how does that happen? That happens when you get caught in a tractor beam from a spaceship or some kind of program, and you get captured.
I think it's the moon. Yeah.
And then the ascension is kind of like the same idea, right? You're ascending and you're going to be, maybe going with the Galactic Federation. And this is the thing is, when my extraterrestrial family visits me, they visit me through a hologram, right? Because they don't come here. I never really talk to them about why they don't come here. Like, what's the problem? That's not a, when we're together, it's not a topic that they want to talk about. It's not.
Do you feel that they're coming from the future, or potentially?
Well, the Greys are coming from the future. That's what the Greys tell us. They're coming from 3,000 years or whatever in the future after this whole thing has been, the nuclear radiation and the microwave radiations have destroyed all the biological material. And so that's why they're here for the last 20 years collecting up a storm, because they're trying to get the last vestiges of human biological material before, people
they're making an ark. Making an ark, yeah.
And this is one of the things is, like, I've talked about this. I have a friend of mine who's a brilliant immunologist out of the box, and she's even created a vaccine that actually awakens the primordial immune system. None of us have that. It's not operating, and it's not on. And what it can do is it can actually eliminate anything in the DNA, the chromosomes, the genes, the cells by the second generation, and actually make the human you perfect, right? And it's been used really successful with the elite. She's been allowed to give, some of the elite that have, cancers that can't be cured, the vaccine, and their cancers have been cured. Anyway, one of the things that she says, she's worked a lot in Russia, and she's worked a lot around the areas of Chernobyl. And she said, so, like, I'm Russian, I'm beefy, not like, like fat beefy, but I'm strong, and I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm stronger than people that are like 20. And because I have that babushka body type, you know what I mean? I'm sturdy, I'm just really strong. I have a whole different kind of genetics than most people. I mean, I've even been on job sites, construction job sites when I was young, and outworked most men. So she said what's happening now from Chernobyl and those areas is you start to see these really attractive Russian women who, are putting themselves out on the market to be like mail order brides. And they're all like really thin, and their little arms, and they're all kind of spindly. And she said that's a direct genetic thing that comes from any kind of nuclear. So I said, so the gray ETs, them having these spindly little bodies are representation of what we would mutate into the future. And she said, exactly.
Yeah, combined with genetic engineering. Did you notice that, because the Anastasia book is profound, I've never even heard of it. Did you notice that before the era we're in, the 2015 to 2016, it looked like the Russian government was preparing for like some massive nuclear holocaust here. I mean, they were building, from what I could tell, they were building bomb shelters like mad. They wanted to have enough capacity for half their population, and they've got 140 million people.
Yeah, Russia's like, they're handling things totally different. I mean, first, Putin creates protection for his people, and then he starts working on the economy. In 2014, he banned, they were preparing for nuclear war because they banned GMOs across the board out of the country. They banned free trade. They didn't want any more of the sick food. Putin came out and said, we're not vaccinating our people. We're not going to feed them GMOs. We're going to grow every kind of good, sustainable, positive, ancient heirloom food we can. And right now they're the largest organic biodynamic. They're the largest biodynamic country in the world, because I do biodynamics, so I'm on the front of all that, which is fully restoring soil and water and healing everything, and, helping to make everything better. Because Rudolf Steiner saw 500 years into the future. So not only was he, during that time frame, we had a lot of these people that showed up that had, major educations, but they also were like mystic type. And he was one of them. And he was able to see 500 years in the future. And he created the agricultural lectures, is what we call them. I think the 8 agricultural lectures from Rudolf Steiner on making the preparations and the biodynamic composting and all this other stuff, because he said that there were going to be very few places here in this world that people could actually grow food because the soil was going to be so sterile and damaged. And I look at the chemtrails as already doing that. I mean, we have trees that just fall over now, big trees, big healthy trees that just fall over because their root systems are damaged from 10 feet down of chemtrails, and all of the heavy metals, which have killed all the microbial mass and sterilized the soil. So, and the radiation and everything else. And that's another reason I like the Anastasia books, is her focus is back on growing food and individuals growing food and building a relationship with nature. And so here we have another person who is advocating, hey, it's the soil people. Hey, it's the seed people. If you want to survive long term, you're going to have to grow food. You're going to have to be in communities, and you're going to have to get along. And the focus is going to have to be the soil. The focus is going to have to be the food if you're going to survive,
I certainly like focusing on food. I figure that if I'm going to enjoy my life as a human, the one thing I want to do is eat well every day.
Yeah. Hey, can you guys give me just 2 minutes? I'll be
Sure
right
can.
back. So talk about something. Then don't forget to remind me to talk about the red plague programming.
Right, got it.
Which is a very important thing. And then also microbial mass and these healing machines, because that is really bothering me right now. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Ben, thanks for coming in and participating in the conversation. You're welcome to stay mic'd in. Well, as long as we don't get those the noise bands that come through. But it's very interesting how the Anastasia line, as coming from the Ringing Cedar series, which I studied intensely about 10 years ago because I thought that was going to be a wave of the future, but it got distracted, and I'm not sure where it went because I went in different directions. And what we have is something there that the concept they have of dashas makes sense, that would have been how people lived previously. And I never thought of it in a Tartarian form, but I wonder if the cross between one of the Ringing Cedar series dashas with star forts would lead somebody into figuring out how the people lived outside of the star forts, but had a place where if some invader came around, they could leave their dacha, move into the star fort, have temporary housing or even winter housing, because Siberia might have been pretty cold, and then go back out to their homes, their farms, and their dachas when the weather was ready and they could get into the spring, summer, fall area. So migration of people between two places during a year might have been very common.
Well, but this is the deal. That we're talking about that in this time frame of humanoids, or people living on this planet. I mean, you go back to what Roger Spur's talking about, and some of these giants that he's tested on the mitochondrial side have human mitochondrial DNA, which is the mother DNA. And he said some of them were 2 miles tall. And he can prove it. He's proved it.
Oh, I have a different theory on that I'll talk to you sometime, because I don't want to take us off the line.
Yeah.
But his stuff is good.
In ancient ways of being, see, we are so not evolved. We're probably the dumbest species that have ever been on the planet. I mean, even the Greys hate our biological material because, they've been creating beings for so long, and the biological material has just gotten worse and worse and worse. And then, we're created, and it's just not very good, right? We're just not very good. Our bodies break down. We don't live very long. It's just kind of, the low end of, a budget, so to speak. But, like people wouldn't have, Anastasia talks a lot about in her books, and I've talked to other people in traditional shamanism, like ancient stuff. And she's a shaman. I mean, that's what she is. She's in a lineage of like white hair, Nordic type ancestry of shamanism, and she has superpowers. She can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, physically, energetically, all kinds of different things. But cold doesn't really bother her. The cold doesn't really bother her at all. She lives in Siberia. She lives in a little cave. She has a pet bear. The animals collect all the food, and then when she wants food, they come and feed her. She can do, amazing things. So the deal is that she talks a lot about the dolmens or something like that, which are these megalithic stones that are they're these megalithic stones in Russia where the ancestors of the Vedras people, which were way long before us now, when they died, in order to leave their information like an energetic library, they were put into these, megalithic rooms and sealed in. And then when they died, their information was embedded in the stones. And you can literally, some people who still carry these ancestries, that's why I really want to go to Russia and visit these areas, because I carry this ancestry that I can touch these dolomines, whatever you want to call them, and that I can get the actual energetic download of all of the information and data that supreme being contained. And so they chose to, instead of transcend this world, they decided to embed everything that they had and knew into these rock structures so that people in the futures could access them, which would go against the controllers of this world. So the information is there. And there's a lot of other stuff that would blow people's minds of places that I've been, that my native teachers have taken me or shown me or talked to other people. But those are things that, can't be discussed at this time because they're still protected from, like the powers that be. So, for example, I'll tell you about this story. My last native teacher, Babado, he was a Shoshone medicine man elder, and he told me a story about this mountain in Arkansas, I believe, that is, even though it has, because that's where argon energy comes from, right? This is the thing, is you have these retarded people that are,
that's what's named
out
after.
in the argon energy is a mountain. That's why the objects are created like pyramids, and you put all these little crystals in them, like if you weren't going to have them at home or you want to wear them or whatever else. But they say like Mount Fuji is one of the most powerful mountains that has argon energy, because these mountains have, the mountains are, now we know they're giants, they're dead giants. And from Roger Spur's work, the artery blood of the giants turned into gold, huge amounts of gold where it's pooled. That he's even proven this fact.
Well,
So
the Egyptians were producing gold. using the pyramids. They had some alchemical process. We've never unlocked it. We don't know how they did it.
Well, it's because the Anunnaki were involved in it to take it off world. So of course it's not something that, right. So the thing is like, and I think that all the machinery that did that kind of stuff was taken off planet because it belonged to the Anunnakis. It didn't belong to us. But anyway, so you have mountains, and so they're pure Oregon energy. They have all the crystals, and they have the gold, and they have all this other stuff. I mean, look at, they're taking down all the mountains down there in Appalachians. Because why? Oh, because they're like half coal. Well, what does coal eventually turn into? You know, so you have, that's where the origination of Oregon energy is, and people don't really understand it. It turns out that Mount Fuji is one of the strongest Oregon energy producers. Thank God, because of Fukushima, you know.
That makes sense because it's so symmetrical. This is all tied into aether theory. I think it's almost like a subfield because we know that the pyramids direct aether flow around them and it causes a charge on the surface. It's like a capacitor plate. And there's this idea that the Earth, the Earth is sucking in energy.
Right. So all those pyramids and everything are not active. In 2011, I met up with a whole bunch of people involved with this Mayan elder who had come into the United States and was teaching a lot about the pyramids and how he carried 3,000 years of information, and he was trying to teach people to use the pyramids as deactivation devices against CERN, because of what CERN was doing, and that CERN was punching holes into the environment and causing earthquakes and really damaging the energetic layers that protect us here. This is why we have so much dark energy now that is here, is because of a lot of that. But he was teaching us how the pyramids can be used for actually deactivating a lot of, the impact of the brunt of some of this technology that we've created.
Bridgette, do you know psychomantiums? It's the psychic resonator they showed in the X-Men movies. The idea is it amplifies your consciousness and your intent.
Yeah, well, I mean, shamans and people can just do this on their own.
Yeah, they can do it on their own.
So the other thing, too, is that I realized is that so I saw this movie the other day, right? And I probably saw it in the 90s when it came out and had Kurt Russell in it.
Name of the movie?
Stargate.
Stargate, okay.
It's called Stargate. Anyway.
Oh, wow, before the series, yeah.
So the thing is, like, I was shocked. Like, literally my jaw hit the floor because the multi-dimensional travel to Earth in the history. Ra, the god, is ruling it all. Ra talks about how he's created that world and the world that the humans have come from, and that he's going, to like destroy it. But there's a lot of really crazy stuff that they put in that movie that no one caught.
They show everything. Yeah, I was just last night researching because I asked my friend if he knew any Antarctica references in Stargate because he's watched all of it. But I looked into it. There's this Battle of Antarctica thing in the Stargate Atlantis series. But that movie preceded all of it. That was like a test rollout to see if the public was gonna be willing to watch that type of knowledge.
No, it was the movie that had the truth in it.
Yeah, okay, so
and a lot of the other stuff was fiction. So anyway, what happened was Ra being an extraterrestrial being who also possesses a human body, right? Right. So here's that possession thing. Here's that channeling thing. Here's that, demonic entity thing for its own agenda, whether it's extraterrestrial. So one of the things I tell people is you really have to stay away from these people who channel anything or anyone or information, because they have a major agenda, and it's their agenda, and they're misleading.
It's really bad right now. It's gotten worse and worse since 2012. It's really snowballed.
Yeah, well, early on, like 27 years ago, I worked with a native shaman woman, Lakota Sioux, and that's pretty much most of the work we did was remove these things from people's energy fields. This is when it really started. In the 60s, it really started with possession. I mean, you have like the Seth series, Gene Roberts, I read all those when I was a teenager. But anyway, so in the Stargate movie, because I always think about like, how would these, if most of the ancient civilizations have stories of the serpent, right? The serpent, the flying serpent, the serpent, there's always like these fire and all this other stuff that's directly in relationship to the serpent gods, like the Mayan and whatever else. Well, in the movie, The Stargate, Ra comes in with a triangle spaceship, and it lands on top of the pyramid. It has a porthole that's like, triangular. And so when it comes down, it sits on top of the pyramid in the movie. And then it activates whatever the pyramid has.
So it's the capstone. It's the missing capstone.
Yeah, but it's huge. The ship is like equal to the size of the pyramid.
Yeah, I know. You said it's a cutout, like where, yeah.
Yeah. So once it plugs in, right, then the spaceship activates and uses the pyramid as a porting station and also accumulating energy, blah, blah, blah. And so after I saw that, it just all made sense to me that we'll never figure out what the pyramid energy was about, because we're missing the parts that go along with them. And whoever they are that are not of this world, they have the parts that actually connect onto these things. And I was certain of that.
Have you followed Richard Hoagland's work? He has this concept, the torsion physics, which is essentially another name for aether physics. He was saying that the Mayan pyramids in the Yucatan, they're taking simple devices and they're like a tuning fork, for example, and it's causing some type of field effect where the inertia or the frequency of a tuning fork changes as different celestial alignments occur, like eclipses and solar alignments, and it's profound. And these are deactivated structures. Like
right. I know, but these are the thing is that you can take a tuning fork on and use it on a human body that's super healthy, and it will create activations like you're talking about. Use a tuning fork on somebody who's sick, and it actually could kill them.
He's actually measuring though the flow of this. He said like orgone energy. That's what I think it's measuring. It's causing a change. Like the tuning fork's in a box and it's supposed to be insulated, but the frequency is changing. So it's a sensor. Yeah. It's like interferometry.
Yeah, I mean, we have all these weird things that we have that we try to figure out what all this other stuff is about, kind of a thing. And this is the other thing too, is the Greys will tell you, if you do have like a non-agenda conversation with the Greys, they will tell you that every time a new world is put together here, like they kill off what was there because it's not working, right? With a flood or nuclear radiation, or they make the sky go dark, they take away the sun, the dark ages, or volcanic activity or whatever else, right? They continually kind of destroy different, they create us, and then, in a short time, they destroy us.
Yeah, I think
So
they
they
might even use mud
they
floods to do that.
well, the thing is they use mud floods, I think, because there were so many like giants. They had to drown them. I mean, a lot of them, got stuck in the mud, which means they wouldn't have eaten. They would have, starved, even if their head was like above the water line. But so each time that they have, and there's this really killer book that I read years ago, like 30 years ago, like some kind of ascension book that talked about how um, that they dabbled in all kinds of manufacturing of all kinds of beings, and that's why we would have Medusas, and that's why we have some of these beings that have like a lion head and a hawk body and bat wings, and because these things were real, they were from like different periods where they were messing with biological material trying to create things in this petri dish. That's kind of like how I look at this world anymore, is we're just a petri dish. We're rats in a maze,
Well, let me shift
and
you
we're trying
back.
to figure things out.
Let me shift you back to go down the path of the red plague programming,
Yeah,
because I
but
know you
hold on,
need
let me
time to do
just
that.
finish this real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Greys have told us, or told me, that all of the stuff here is falsified. They're like the pyramids and all this other stuff. And yeah, maybe they might be able to do things. We might be able to make things up to do things with them. But basically, they don't mean anything. And that they call them movie sets, like a movie set. So what they do is they come in, they make the movie set, and then they create the beings to go into that movie set. And they said that way you guys stay distracted because you have more reptilian brains, which makes you want to know, which makes you obsessed, which makes you too fixated on material and information and study and all this other stuff. And so we design sets that are going to keep you completely distracted from, basically your own illumination potential, and also will keep you distracted, till you die. And and so all this information is pretty fake. So when I first saw the pyramid and it had the hydroglyph in it that had an airplane and a helicopter, I just almost fell off my chair laughing, because I'm like, that is the proof that they have faked this reality. And then you have people with this reptilian mindset that want to say, well, they knew we were going to have helicopters and airplanes, 3,000 years ago. It's like, no, they put it in there because it's like a joke, right? Here's the movie set. We're creating, our own, Hollywood mega movie, and you guys are all the actors, and you don't even know it. And then we're watching you all in your stupidity, because the main thing you should be focusing in on, which is your own illumination through practice and study and removing yourself from the system, your own enlightenment to bypass the system, which is the main, plans, the main exit plan that you have, you'll never get to. You'll never even, because you're so distracted with all the other, movie set designs and, what they can do or what they can't do.
The actor who played Morpheus, there was some movie that came out real recently. It was strange, but I have to look it up. It was about some people were sent to some remote place because they were in communication with a hacker. When they got there, the entire thing was a gigantic, elaborate. The Greys had constructed a whole world, and they were trapped in an experiment, and it's weird. And he had like robotic legs. I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen people like decompose it and break it down. This is recent, I think.
Well,
Is the other actor? Yeah, is other actor from the Giver movie? Boy, I'll look
and
it
so
up.
the Greys will, right? So hold on a second. So the Greys will tell you that that all the stuff, that they did the set design with,